All right. Hello and welcome to the last breakout session for today. This is track 3, Patients as Partners and Drivers. And this session is sponsored by Shire Pharmaceuticals. My name is Carol Detch, and I will be your host for this breakout, the last breakout of day 1 of our summit. So as a reminder, this track is being live streamed, and I would like to welcome our remote attendees and remind everyone to download the mobile app. We're getting questions, and I'll be able to see them and field those and send them off to our panelists. Our last breakout session for today will be providing an update on legislative and advocacy efforts that are critical to the rare disease community. Today we will be hearing from Jennifer Bernstein, Executive Vice President of Horizon Government Affairs, Julia Jenkins, Executive Director and Secretary of the Board of Directors at EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases, Angela Ramirez, Holmes, President of the California Action Link for Rare Disease, and Darlene Shelton, President and founder of Danny Dose Alliance. So we'd like to give them a nice warm welcome, and we'll start things off. At the end of their presentations, we're going to be, we really want to get an animated and active Q&A going, so start thinking about your questions.
Hello. Please tell me that everybody knows this schoolhouse rocks, because all the young people in my office had no idea what this was, and it made me feel really old. But my name is Jennifer Bernstein. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on right now on the Hill, some of the structure, because believe it or not, there is a structure on the Hill, and how you fit into that. So I want to start just by taking an informal survey. How many people in the room have done meetings on Capitol Hill with your representative or their office? Okay. How many of you in the room have done meetings with your representative, federal representative, in their district offices? That's awesome. Okay. Well, you guys don't need me to talk about anything. You already know all this. But there's a process, like I said, how a bill becomes a law. Please tell me you guys know what this is from. Because again, nobody in my office knew any of this. But this is how, if you really aren't familiar with the process, this is what you think it looks like. And I get why. It's really confusing, because it actually looks like this. And so this is chaos. It's organized chaos. But the point in me showing you this is to demonstrate all of the different points at which you can insert yourself into this chaos. Let me go back to that. I want to make sure that everybody understands that there's a continuum with bills, or even if you don't have a bill, but you're just concerned about an issue, for you to become involved. You don't have to become involved at a specific point. You don't have to wait for something. If there's something that you need to talk about with your member or their office, you can go in whenever you want. But if you want to apply extra pressure, you can center that and organize around various points of the legislative process. So getting a bill introduced is obviously a big one, pushing a member for bill introduction. There's hearings, there's markups, there's amendments to bills, and then there's floor action. And then around all of these points in that process are good points to organize, hopefully organize if it's not just you. If it's just you, that's okay. But the point is, there are lots of opportunities to become involved, and it's slightly overwhelming, but that's okay, because the more you do this, the more practice you get and the less overwhelming it will be for you. I used to work on the Hill, and so there were constituents who would come in and handle very effective meetings with me. Then there were constituents who would come in and not really know why they were there to meet with me. They were usually sent there by another organization. They weren't prepared, and I felt like they were wasting my time. And that made me not really want to take meetings with them again, and it made me not really want to work with the organization that was sponsoring whatever day it was that they were there for. So based on my experience, you need to go in and you need to cultivate relationships with Hill staff. It's not easy to do, but it takes time. And I mean, obviously time is a huge barrier, but you have to work at this. The first thing I will say is that you have to be confident going in there, requesting a meeting, and you have to know that you have the right to go in there and talk to your member or their staff anytime about anything at all. And I hated when constituents would say to me, well, I pay your salary, so you have to do this and this. But they did pay my salary, and you pay their salaries. And so I think a lot of people don't want to go in there and do these meetings because they don't feel like they have the right to do that. I'm telling you that you do and encouraging you to be confident when you go in there because you pay their salaries. The second thing to remember is that you have to assume that the people who you are meeting with don't know anything about what you are in there to talk about. They're probably not going to know any specific disease-related issues. They might not know much about the community in general. That's okay. That's where you come in. You're there to educate them, to provide the background information, to be a continuous source of information for them, to clearly articulate what the problem or the problems are. It's great if you have a solution. It's okay if you don't have a solution because you can work with them on coming up with that. But you can't work with them on coming up with that if you don't have a relationship. You have to follow up regularly, not stalk. But like I said, continually provide information to the office and be seen as a resource or a partner to the staff person. You really are the expert in your issues. I mean, when I worked on the Hill, I had to cover 30 different issues, and I knew just a little bit about each one, and I just didn't have the time to really dig in on anything. And so quite frequently when we would have hearings or markups, I would have to go to people who would come in to meet with me about these issues and get my background information from them. And your goal should be to be that person that the staffers rely on for the information. Midterms. I'm so tired of talking about elections, but they're coming up in about 5 weeks. And so the problem or the challenge in developing relationships with members and their staff is that these people are going to sometimes go away. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's devastating. There's a couple, sometimes it's really okay. But there's a lot of staff turnover, so you might have a really great relationship with the staff person, and then they leave. And then you have to start over again in that office completely from scratch, and that happens a lot. But sometimes the member will actually leave either because they chose to retire or because they lost their seat. And then you have to start fresh again with a brand new member, probably from a different party, who probably doesn't know anything about what your issues are. And it's a little overwhelming to have this constant cycle be going on. That's how it works. You should just kind of look at this relationship building as it's a cycle. So you have it now, but you might not have it a year from now, and you'll have to start over again, and you'll get there just like you did the first time. So before I switch, this is the most current polling data that my office has. I don't really want to get into politics because this isn't the place for it, but just know it's very likely the House is going to flip from R to D. The Senate is still in play, not as certain, but the Senate might flip, it might not. Either way, it's going to be a challenge because I think it's going to be very difficult to get our issues or a lot of issues on the radar. So we're going to have to work extra hard with the new Congress to get in there, to meet with those offices who are new, to educate them and to cultivate those relationships. And that is absolutely imperative that that happens, and it happens early. So the new members will be in as of the beginning of February. I encourage everybody who can to either meet with those new offices if you're in a district where there's turnover in the district, or as Julia will talk about, come to DC for Rare Disease Day Week. It's Day Week, right? Rare Disease Week. It used to be one day, now it's a week, where you can meet with your members and learn about everything that's going on the ground in DC. I guess that's it. I guess my main point in going over this with you is so that you understand not to be overwhelmed and to go in there and do these meetings. It's okay if you don't do it perfect. You will do a perfect job when you do like 30 of these meetings. You will always run into members who might not seem to care. Please don't stop. Please just be totally persistent and work on these relationships and be heard, because your issues are never going to get picked up if you're not vocal about them, particularly heading into the new Congress. So please, if you need help with what to say or how to schedule a meeting, if you're having problems with a particular office, my contact information is here. Just reach out to me and let me know, and I'm happy to help you in any way that you need to become effective at developing these relationships.
So you'll notice that we all have just a few slides and are only talking a little bit because we really want to open it up for questions at the end and leave a lot of time for discussion. So I will see. For those of you not familiar with the EveryLife Foundation, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that seeks to drive public policy to bring life-saving diagnostic and treatment opportunities to the rare disease community. We have 4 main policy goals, but the one I'm talking about tonight is it is tonight in DC, but to enhance the patient voice in policy making, drug development, and regulatory decision making. We really believe that patients should be their own spokesperson and that you shouldn't let anyone else represent you. You guys are the experts in your diseases. You are going to be the most effective lobbyists on Capitol Hill. So I'm going to tell you how you can be a lobbyist. So this is a chart we show all the time that shows how important in-person meetings are with your members of Congress. But you also have to keep following up, and following up. So you can see here that in-person visits from constituents is the very most important thing. So the constituents have the power in influencing the decision-making process. One of the best things that the rare disease community has done in the last 30 years is help pass the 21st Century Cures Act. And this is because patients like you went to Capitol Hill, patients like little Max Schill, who's up there with the bill signing, and it was just an incredible thing. But this is the things that we got for the rare disease community. We improved the FDA's ability to recruit and retain staff, which helps improve the drug development process. Billions in NIH funding, millions in FDA funding, incentives for drug development, neurological disease surveillance, compassionate use reform, and the patient-focused drug development. Look at that number, 94 Senate votes yes. Those 5 senators, but but this just shows when the patient community unites, that we really have the power to do some amazing things. But we can't stop there because there's still work to be done. So I invite all of you here to join us. I have some brochures that we can pass out at the end of the session, or you can stop by our booth, or you can talk to my staff that's right in the 3rd row right there. We are hoping to host 500 rare disease patient advocates for Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. We are very, very excited. We had 400 last year, and we were very sorry to have to turn people away because we didn't have enough space. We have rectified that problem. We will have a large ballroom and 2 small ballrooms, as well as a lot of foyer space for food and everything. All of these events are free because we believe you shouldn't have to pay to participate in democracy. We have travel stipends. We offer travel stipends that range from $400 to $1,000, depending on how far away you are. We guarantee 2 travel stipends for every state. We want to have all 50 states covered and represented. And we train everyone about the legislative process. We have sessions for new folks. We have sessions for experienced folks to deep dive into policy if you want to learn all about how the appropriations process works, or I want to deep dive in particular issues. So we invite all of you to come and join us in DC for an entire week's worth of events. This is how you contact us. Sign up for our newsletters and action alerts and follow us on social media. One of my big messages that we talked a little bit about in the election, we are members of the RARE party. That means any member of Congress, no matter their political party, if they want to help rare disease patients and pass legislation, that is who we want to work with, and that is who we care about. And we really need to make sure that we make more members join the RARE party. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Angela Ramirez, Holmes, president of Cal Rare. So my story, I am a mom who had 5 years ago had an 8-year-old who collapsed suddenly, and 3 letters that I didn't even know existed meant something and has changed my life, and that is AVM. It's an arterial venous malformation ruptured in my 8-year-old's brain. And it is a rare, life-threatening brain condition. And thankfully, 5 years later, well, there is a treatment available. He had gamma knife radiation, but it is also came with some lovely side effects as well. So he's doing pretty well at 13, taller than me, so that's good. But it launched me into being a mama on a mission. And I joke about that because I am not going to take no from an answer from some of these folks, let me just tell you. So after I kind of got my wits about me and figured out what the heck an AVM was and what we're going to do about it and got my child stable, as someone who has worked in the state legislature, I decided that I was clearly vulnerable to being recruited to do more. And so I started working on this stuff, and I didn't want to, there was an AVM Foundation, so I didn't feel that I needed to do that so much as I needed to try to figure out, because I know the impact of policy, how to do this on a bigger scale, how to take all of our small organizations that fight for our children and our specific diseases and put them all together. So we launched a nonprofit 2 years ago called the California Action Link for Rare Diseases, or CalRare. And basically, we're a membership organization, a coalition of all of the rare disease stakeholders in California. We want to raise awareness, and we also want to have policymakers understand about rare diseases and what they can do to make an impact. So our first project was the Rare Disease California Caucus. You may know there's a congressional caucus for rare diseases that EveryLife launched. This is the second state caucus. The first was in Pennsylvania, so shout out to Pennsylvania. Second one is California. Oh boy. So this is a bipartisan, bicameral legislative caucus. That means both houses, state assembly and state senate, are members. We wanted to bring public and legislative awareness. We wanted to educate legislators and staff. Some of them have zero idea what a rare disease is. We needed to make them understand not only what a rare disease is, but what policies can help patients. Most importantly, we wanted to make sure patients had a voice in shaping that policy. So what happens a lot of times is there are lobbyists for pharmaceutical and other companies, and they come, and the patients really, save a lobby day here or there, are really not being heard from. And we need to change that in Sacramento and in DC. So this is an opportunity for legislators to engage with patients and the whole industry and show them that we have partners. Because if pharma might have a bad rap in some spaces, but we know that that relationship is tenuous, but it's needed. So we wanted to bring everyone together: patients, biopharmaceutical industry, academia, researchers, individuals who care. So we have 2 co-chairs. One is a Democrat and one is a Republican. And we have, California has a big state legislature. We have nearly a quarter of the members who've joined the Rare Disease Caucus. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. We have some work to do in the Senate. By the way, take a look really quickly at this, because if your state legislator is not on here, you have a state assembly member and a state senator if you're from California. If their name's not on there, we want you to call and ask them to join. So this year we had this was kind of our first 2 briefings we had in California. Our first one talked about what a rare disease was, and then introduced the concept of this whole genome sequencing pilot project. There was a proposal. Our Rare Disease Caucus co-chairs signed on to a budget proposal. We had a budget surplus in California this year. Lots of people fighting for that money. To be honest, I wasn't really sure this was going to be possible. But we had $2 million appropriated in the state budget. as a clinical pilot project for undiagnosed Medi-Cal pediatric patients. So interesting to note, after the ACA, there was a sharp rise in Medi-Cal signups. Since 2011, 50% of the births in California are Medi-Cal. And so that also means, Medi-Cal covers a third of Californians. It's also where some of our underserved populations are, that oftentimes we lack the details in those research. So the idea is to demonstrate two things: clinical help for patients to avoid the diagnostic odyssey. So what this project will do is it will take a minimum of 100 pediatric and neonatal undiagnosed patients in children's hospitals in 3 areas in California: San Diego, Fresno, and Oakland. And it will take those cases, get them whole genome sequenced, and then hopefully serving the second mission. So now we hopefully will have a diagnosis, and then we also will have a cost savings for Medi-Cal that we can prove. We will have data, so we can show that instead of a 5 to 7+ years of a diagnostic odyssey to try to get a diagnosis, that instead, if we do this as a first line, that we will be able to make that more cost efficient for Medi-Cal. And as of course, we're saving babies, right? So that's what we're doing. So if you're not from California, then we are how to start a legislative caucus. So it took us 2 years to do this. Do your homework. Does your state legislature have issue caucuses? A caucus is just an informal group who share either a common demographic or policy interest. Examples you might have heard: the Women's Caucus, the Rural Caucus. Congress has a Bourbon Caucus. The Veterans Caucus. The Rare Disease. You can coalesce around any issue, policy interest or otherwise. They have an African American caucus, So some states have caucuses, issue caucuses, and some states don't, so you need to check. And then if your state has a legislative health committee, that's where we started. We picked the chair and the co-chair of the health committee in the assembly to be our co-chairs. And then are there legislators who've spoken out about health or rare diseases? Sometimes there's doctors in your legislature. Sometimes they have well-publicized children who have rare diseases, or maybe they have one themselves. So that's the first part. You got to check on all that. The second is you need to find a chair or a co-chair. And again, I would start with the health committee in your prospective legislature. They tend to at least have heard about rare diseases. And then ask your own people to join. And maybe that's where you go first. Maybe you go talk to your own legislator and say, here's my story, and here's what you can do. And don't give up. It took us 2 years. We had to go through a speaker change and a ban on all new caucuses, and then we revisited and made it happen, and look what happened. So you can't give up. You got to keep working on it. And frankly, I really do chase down members and ask them to join, and I tell them my 5-minute sidewalk story and tell them, here, sign here, I'd like you to join the caucus. It's very hard to say no to a mom who is on a mission and who is emotional about her kid, the least they can do, right? So that's my mantra. I just don't give up. So if you are in California, you can ask your state assembly member or state senator to join the Rare Disease California Caucus. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. You can join CalRare, again, membership organization. Patient organizations have a very low dollar. We're doing a drive right now. And Rare Disease Day in Sacramento coming up. We have some other awareness activities that will be happening with CalRare. If you like basketball, the Warriors. So I will take your questions at the end because we have one more.
Hello, I'm Darlene Shelton from Missouri, and our family started the Danny's Dose Alliance. Let me get my slide going. There we go. And basically, I wanted to talk to you guys about change and influencing change. Oh, my text is all rearranged, okay. And influencing legislators. Basically, what I like to share with everyone, our family has no political science degrees or anything. I do accounting, we have engineers, residential construction for years, and I like to share with families that your background education is not what's going to make you a good advocate. I've met some that have the background and they're not a good advocate. So it's your passion, and that just one single family can make a huge change. So because of hemophilia, we became part of the rare disease space. And because of hemophilia, we learned that we have national protocols that prohibit our paramedics, one, from administering medications that are not carried on the ambulance. When you have a rare disease, you have to carry your own meds. It goes further than that. They also are not allowed to deviate from standing protocols that were written back in the 80s. And so basically, when you have a special medical need, you're really not covered for prompt and proper care. We knew as a family that something had to be done, and literally jumped in with both feet to the deep end of the pool with concrete block tied around our feet, is what it felt like at times. This is actually, when I say it's a family affair, this was Lily's 3rd birthday that we spent at the Capitol, and her little shirt even says, "It's my birthday." So she got a lot of candy that day, a lot of candy that day. And so one of the first things we learned, and I've known this from doing business and doing some advertising, you have to be part of the solution. And it became very apparent when you're talking to legislators that being part of that solution is showing up. And it's kind of what they were saying. Be consistent, be there, be in front of them. Just phone calls all the time don't really help. Just emails all the time, just doing the one thing. And to walk in and ask for help. We did not know the answer. We just knew there was a problem, and in our naivety, knew that they were the ones that needed to help us with the solution. So we showed up and we asked. Sometimes not knowing the unwritten rules is really handy. But to offer to help. You're not walking in the door and dumping it all in their lap and saying, "Okay, you fix this, see ya." It's not going to go anywhere. They're not going to think that that you are intentional and determined to get a solution. So offer to help, and then be consistent. And by be consistent, one thing I learned, there is so much on their plate. And my favorite thing were the pig farmers that were waiting in the hall behind us. And I forgot what the bill was. I don't have anything against pork, but, we're trying to save lives, and they're worried about some bill about giving hormones to their pigs. Sorry, I just didn't feel like it went on the same level as ours. But to say there's somebody next in line and somebody next in line after that and somebody next in line after that, you have to consistently be in contact with them. And I say minimum every 2 weeks. Send an email, make a phone call, follow up. One thing I like to do is kind of leave them with homework. Like, okay, or give myself homework and say, I will get back with you by this date. So you've promised them, and you've set a date on when we're going to talk again. Because, like they said, it's okay to not know the answers. I didn't know the answers to all the questions that were asked when we were there. I had some connections with some people that I could get back with them, and I did that quite often. I had to get back with them. As I said, types of contact, personal visits at the Capitol, out at their local offices. At community events are really good. I think that's one of the best ones. Of course, email, and actually fax. Fax still works, and it's different. It's a sheet of paper. Usually if I do fax, I will, I might even add a cartoon or something to it. Something that makes it a little catchy, that it's not just words on a page. And then, of course, phone calls. And then there's snail mail. We always do snail mail as something catching. I went back to my advertising education on the snail mail. We did letters. We did half-sheet postcards. Everything was bright. If it was a letter, it was on colored paper. I never sent one single document on white paper. I'm just not going to do it. It's going to go with those other 100 sheets on that page. You send it on bright yellow paper, there's 99 sheets on that desk, and yours is the yellow one. So, And you'll see the sticky note campaign. If you can find out people's personalities, our governor had this thing that he carried sticky notes in his pocket. And when he was walking and talking to people, if they said, "Oh, I'll get back with you. He would whip out a sticky note and hand it to them so that they wouldn't forget. Well, we found that out. We did a sticky note campaign to our governor after the bill was passed, and we wanted a public signing. And so we had people that lived in Jefferson City that went and took sticky notes and put all over his door and down his walls. We mailed sticky notes in envelopes to him, and I created sticky note JPEGs with all kinds of different messages, shared them with people. They were emailed, they were faxed. I don't know how many sticky notes of some sort the man got. Well, he did our signing. So anything catchy, especially if it goes with them, and any kind of leave behind. So make it a family affair. We always took the kids. This was our very first day at the Capitol. You'll see that join with your rare family, your immediate family, your rare family, and then also those stakeholders. So in this one picture, I went too far. No, what happened? Yep, went too far. In this picture, you have a director of a nonprofit, you have an industry rep, 3 generations from the Shelton family, and 1 legislator. That combination is a terrific combination, and that particular legislator was the one who led the charge and really took us through on our bill. Things to remember. They're human. As my dad taught me when I was growing up, they put their pants on one leg at a time just like you do. If they don't, they're a little weird. Meaning, in essence, no one's really better than you. You respect the amount of education that they have, but they are not better than you. So they're human. They have compassion, or they should, and they did sign up for the job. They signed up for that position, meaning they promised to help with your issues, whatever those may be. And my personal opinion is people rise to their expectations. So I always walk in the door leaving them with an expectation, and of course, with what we're doing, it's to save lives. It's to assure that our paramedics can, and our ER doctors can provide the care needed promptly and properly. I expect you to come along beside us and help make sure this happens. So I'm very honest with that. This is Danny Noah at our first day at the Capitol with Representative Fitzwater, and he fell in love with Danny. He had tears in his eyes when we explained that with hemophilia, he had clotting factor, and if he couldn't get that clotting factor, that he very well could die. It broke his heart, and he was one of our biggest advocates. He's an amazing man. Be polite. Don't burn bridges. They are human, again. Be polite. If they're rude, just end the conversation. You're not going to get anywhere that day anyway. Just end the conversation and just leave. You know, just nicely, just leave, just end it. Go talk to somebody else. Be persistent, as everybody has said, and quite honestly, don't take no for an answer. When they say, well, Mrs. Shelton, you understand. I know what I do understand, that no, it's not easy. We're going to have to work. There's going to be some hard work involved, but I do understand these are lives that have to be saved. That's what I do understand. And kind of you have not because you ask not. You know, you have to walk in there expecting and ask a question. So we started, our very first day we ever visited the Capitol in my life was March 11th of 2015. As of May 12th, Lillian's 5th birthday, actually, I messed up, our bill passed. On 2 months later, the governor signed our bill. So Missouri is now the first state to have legislation that allows paramedics to provide that proper treatment for people with special medical needs. And we're working to be nationwide. So since that point, we are growing, we are expanding, and it really takes hard work, willingness to be part of a team, collaboration with all your other stakeholders, consistency, and tenacity. Takes a whole lot, pays off.
Okay, so now we're going to have some questions. I've got one from the live stream. Can I just see who has questions out there so we can utilize this 10 minutes well? Any hands? Well, you'll probably be thinking of a question as I feel this one out. So from our audience, everyone on the Hill moves and talks so fast. This is hard for some with communicative disorders. Is there an appropriate way to ask a staffer to slow down a bit?
Say, I need you to slow down. The lingo, the acronyms, you're moving 1,000 miles a minute because you're usually really pressed for time. And some of these meetings are, I always like to say some of these meetings will happen in a really loud hallway. And they're not always the best meetings to have. Partly that's why I recommend that you go to your district office and have a meeting with your member or their staff person in an environment that is more calm. People aren't running to votes. You have a little more time. But if you need a staff person to slow down and explain something, please just ask and they will be happy to do it. And even if they're not happy to do it, make them do it anyway because you pay their salary. But no, if somebody were to ask me just to slow down and explain something, I would. Nobody benefits if everyone's kind of just talking over somebody and they're not understanding what you're saying. It's just a wasted meeting. So do not be shy about asking somebody to slow down or explain something.
We also have an in-district lobby days program that we run through RDLA that we help advocates get those in-district meetings during August recess when they're all back. Those are they're like royal, out in the middle of nowhere meetings where you get longer times and it's much slower pace. So that's also another way that you can get that time, that one-on-one time. And also those staffers aren't like the kind of crazy lingoed policy people that you'll get in DC. So they're gonna speak more of common language.
Any other questions? Oh, good. And one right there. Let me just run up here and you can think of, and maybe if people have some great experiences to share of their success stories.
I have two they might be too complicated for a Q&A, but I just wanted to ask anyway. So I did go to Rare Disease Week in February, and it was an amazing experience. Like, I loved everything about it. And our group from New York was a great group, but I feel like I did have something to talk about. I did have my story to tell, and it actually fit really well with the group I was with to kind of complement their stories. But it wasn't, the piece of legislation that related most to me wasn't on the table. It wasn't going to be up for a vote or anything like that. And I'm kind of wondering, my first question is kind of like, how important is it to go kind of, even though you don't have a thing that you want to pass, but just to say like, hey, rare diseases are important, this is my story, and just to give information. Like, I don't know, like, I had a really good experience and I loved it, but I don't know if it was important or, past just what I experienced, or you know what I mean? Like, I just kind of want a sense of that. And then my other question is, like, for instance, like if I were to try to create a rare disease caucus in New York, like, is it important to have things you want to pass, or like, what does the caucus do? Do I make meetings for them to give them information, or does the chair make meetings for themselves, or like, kind of like, what's the next step of the caucus? Like, how does the caucus work?
Yeah, you want to caucus first?
We'll do the caucus one first. So basically, I formed it, and then we got people to join, and that was like my mission for the entire year. All I did was try to get people to join the caucus, and they did nothing. We did not have a briefing. We didn't have anything. What we did is said, look, this is a low ask. We just want you to care, and we just want you to join. And we did not, you don't have to sign on to any legislation. And just so you know, the California caucus runs exactly the same as congressional. The caucus itself does not take positions because it gets a little tricky with the political stuff. And there's a lot about how the sausage is made, and we don't want to get into that. Basically, we provide information and a space for advocacy, and we do not have the caucus itself take positions. Now, I did mention that our caucus co-chair signed onto this letter, but it wasn't a caucus thing per se. It was an effort that we did, and we informed the caucus, but it wasn't like everybody sign on before we agreed to do it. In terms of steps, the next step was we had a hearing. And so when you have a chair of the caucus, they usually then assign a staff person. So I said, I'll help. I'll do whatever work needs to happen. They assigned a staff. I worked with the staff. We set up with a briefing. We got advice from EveryLife. We made sure there was an adult patient perspective and child patient perspective. We had academic speaker on the topic. The first one was Rare Disease 101. What's a rare disease? And then have a couple patient stories. And it's 1 hour. It was like not a heavy lift for anybody. The legislators sort of pop in and out. They don't spend a ton of time. A lot of staff comes to the room, and that's okay too. So my thing is just get it started and then figure it out.
Okay, we've got 3 more
I'm
questions.
going to answer the first question. So it's absolutely important for you to come in and meet with your members of Congress and build those relationships with the staff, even if you don't have an ask, because they consider legislation all year round. And if you can impact them with their story, they're going to use that story when they're considering legislation that might impact you. So whether it be healthcare reform or opioid legislations, if you're talking about pain, there are so many different aspects that you might not even be aware of that your story will have an impact on. And if you set yourself up as a resource, they might actually reach back out to you when they are considering that legislation, and then you can really have an impact.
Can I just add on to that really quick? I will mention that when I worked on the Hill, I worked for a member on a committee who had jurisdiction over FDA. So all of the rare disease issues would have fallen under that committee's jurisdiction. And in the entire time that I was on the Hill and I worked on healthcare issues, nobody came in to talk to me about rare diseases. I worked on the Hill, I left the Hill, I still didn't know anything about them. And I was introduced to this world many years after I left the Hill, and I happened to be at an investor conference and I heard somebody talk about them, and I thought, Jesus, why didn't anybody come in and talk to me about this? Literally had no clue. That's exactly why you need to go in, even if you don't have an ask, because people just don't know. If they're not in this world, they don't know about it.
Here's a question right here.
Hi. We're a rare disease nonprofit, Joubert Syndrome Foundation, and going through our nonprofit Form 990, there are little check boxes that I don't remember the exact wording, but left me with the impression that lobbying is restricted to some degree for a 501c3, but I don't know how to interpret that really. Do any of you have this concept of like where that line is drawn, what nonprofits are allowed to do and what they're not?
Sure. So if you are a nonprofit public charity, you do have a right to lobby. If you are you paid by your organization? You as a person, you have no paid employees? Then you don't have a problem. You as an individual have a constitutional right to lobby your government.
But we don't call it lobbying because there are specific rules about that.
Well, advocating. But if you're, basically there's 2 laws. If you file, you can use up to 15% of your resources to lobby, official, real lobbying. And then there's kind of the gray area where they say no more than like 20%. But the foundation is a nonprofit 501c3. We spend about 10% of our resources doing direct lobbying. But if a person is volunteering, that does not count as spending any resources lobbying.
And there are very specific rules about lobbying, so we actually don't use the word because they're lobbyists. Those are very specific rules about that. Education and advocacy is what we do. And so there are not restrictions on education and advocacy for nonprofits.
I'm sorry. Darlene, did you want to? There's one more question here and another one, and I think we've got 2 more minutes left in the session.
Okay. Real quick, there is a form, if like our organization, we knew that our intent was to create legislation. So there is a form, I think it's a 5268, but don't hold me to that you actually can fill out. So you're telling the IRS that your organization does have the intent to influence legislation. It actually helps you. And because you're saying up front, yes, we're going to do this. And it's just kind of an honesty up front thing.
Hey, my name is Chris Porter. I'm the head of government affairs and policy for Retrophin. But I just wanted to add to what Julia and Jennifer said about the power of you coming to DC in person. And in case you don't know, the stakes are incredibly high coming in the new Congress. This last Congress actually cut incentives for orphan drugs in half. They originally voted to get rid of the orphan drug tax credit completely, but patient groups like EveryLife and others got together. Jennifer's great team in DC worked with other rare disease companies and turned that around and got it restored. But if we don't make a good showing next spring about the importance of rare disease, they might come back and try to cut it again. And as far as good can come out of Washington. I also spent a long time on Capitol Hill, and I have to say, to the extent anything good comes out of Washington, it's always been by moms on a mission who refuse to take no for an answer. So.
We've got one more question over here. And this has been great to get everybody's feedback and comments. Hold on. Maybe if you can introduce yourself too.
Hi, thank you. Terry Ellsworth from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My son has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and I think it was Julie that said just share a story. So my story is my son advocates with me. He's been on Capitol Hill, but the in-district lobby days, I agree with whatever one of you said. I think it's much more personal. You get more time. My congressman has gotten to know my son, calls him his little buddy. And 2 years ago when we were there, we had our 30 minutes, came back out. There were 8 or 10 AARP advocates waiting. And my congressman took the time to introduce Billy, because we had just gotten our Duchenne muscular dystrophy drug approved. And he just put Billy on a pedestal and just said, you know, what a great young advocate he is. And of course, that ruffled Billy's feathers. Last year, we went, and they already have, you know, the asks before we get in there. So I make Billy ask each year. He's old enough. He's a teenager. He's pushing 18 now. So last year, I made him ask about joining the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus. And he says, well, you know, Billy, I reviewed this, and I told my staff that I decided I'm going to join. So it works. And when we do speaking engagements, and I tell the teenagers, the high school kids, you know, how many of you know what an advocate is? I said, find something that you're passionate about, raise your voice, use your voice. We're living proof that your voice matters and you can get things done. But I said 2 things, be respectful and be pragmatic. I think those 2 things are important also. But advocacy works, and you know, we're living proof among many others. And it can be scary at first, but do it. It's very empowering. You'll be amazed.
So there's 2 great quotes about advocacy that I remind myself a lot, and this is probably a really good note to end on, if I do say so myself. And somebody said, you know, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so you have to be there in order, you know, you have to show up. And it's just keep showing up. And then the second is, if there's no chair for you at the table, bring your own. So you have to be there, and you have to show up, and you have to just not give up, because your story matters. And we might be rare individually, but together we can make a huge difference. And that's what we're finding when you partner with other folks, when you join coalition, when you join a group, when you show up with 500 advocates on Capitol Hill, you feel great. When you show up here and I never knew there were so many people who would advocate at my first Global Genes Conference. And I was overwhelmed at first and then went, yeah, let's do this.
So can we thank Angela and Jennifer and Julia and Darlene for sharing these important policy and legislative updates with us? This concludes our first day of breakout sessions, and at this time, we ask that you jump onto that mobile app and you take our brief survey to provide feedback. What's going to happen now? We're going to all meet back in the main ballroom, and we're going to learn more about the Thrive Collaboration Initiative and our closing presentation, Lives Changed, Stories with an Impact. The presentation will be followed by our night reception sponsored by Shire, and thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you all.